Now we're now recording. So I'm going to open up the floor before we get into today's lesson and ask if there are any questions about the assignment. We've got the group project. The next round is coming up next week. Next Sunday is when it's due, not this Sunday. So are there any questions about anything up until this point?
Our group kind of ran into a problem, but it wasn't like when we did ours in Google Docs,
Mm-hmm.
and then when we like downloaded it into a Word document, apparently like it changed all of our formatting.
Okay.
Because we went back and checked, and everything like in our Google Docs was in like the right formatting for APA, but then like the margins and stuff and like spacing got changed.
Yeah, and that's the problem with Google Docs and trying to convert something to Google Docs and put it in a Word document. There's another option, and maybe class, if anybody has a better solution to this, I've heard that just converting it, if possible, converting it to a PDF and sending it that way is probably a more ideal way to send it. Does anybody have any other suggestions other than that?
I was gonna do a PDF. I just didn't know if you wanted that. But I don't know. I ran into the same issue with the Google Docs to the document. I don't know. I just ended up downloading it to the Google Drive, and then it pulled up as a document. So I don't know. Like Google Docs is iffy sometimes.
Yeah, and I by and large, I don't accept Google Docs because sometimes it really depends on if I have access or not. And sometimes students give me access and sometimes they don't. I've had that happen. I don't think it has happened in this class. But other classes, they've submitted Google Docs and I don't have access to view it, so I can't grade it. So I wind up giving them a 1 out of whatever it is that they get and just put a note on there to send me a PDF version or the correct version, so that way I can read it, because I can't give a grade if I don't read it. So I give them 1 point just to get their attention. But if that happens, just by and large, though, please don't send me Google Docs. Just try and convert them to PDF. And if you have to convert it to a Word document, just make sure that all your margins and everything are correct, so that way you're not getting points off the format. Okay. All right. Any other questions or concerns up until this point or moving forward? All right. So moving forward, we're going to be looking at everything that we've had for quizzes up until the midterm. All those items are out the window. I'm not telling you to dump all the information that we've covered, but from this point on, all the quizzes through the end of the semester will be eligible for the final exam, and the final exam will be very much the same format as the midterm. Okay, so there are no questions on that. We have next Sunday is going to be due to me will be the rough draft for your group. So start thinking about that now, making sure, because this is going to be equivalent to what your final paper should look like. This should basically be your final paper. So format, this is the best time to get all the details ironed out as far as the errors, grammatical errors, margins, whatever. So a lot of students tend to just give me garbage. They kind of just throw their minds on paper and they don't format. And that's fine if that's your rough draft. The problem is you're not going to get quality feedback on that. I've had some students that just gave me basically an outline, and I said, well, that's great for an outline. However, I can't give you feedback on format issues, on flow, that sort of thing. So basically, I'm going to grade this exactly like I would grade your final paper. And a little bit more lenient than your final paper, but I'm going to give you great feedback, because once you turn in your final paper, there's really no feedback. It is what it is, and there's no way for you to correct that. So be very serious about the rough draft, because it's going to tell you a lot about what your final product should look like. Okay. And then in week 12, I believe you'll have your presentation proposal due, and that could just be the form of slides. Send me your slides and send me like a little narrative. The instructions are there as to who's going to be doing what, and again, the division of labor, who's going to be doing what and when. And you can be creative, do videos, whatever it is you want to do. If you don't have a video created by week 12, at least just send me something saying what you're doing your video on and that sort of stuff. Okay. Was pack back due this week? This week it is. Last week it was not. So there was nothing in for. Well, let me double check. You should have something for this week. I'm gonna get in here and look now, just to be sure.
Yeah, because I don't know. When I checked Packback, it said something was due last week. So I mean, I just submitted something anyways. But
Oh,
yeah.
you did? Okay, yeah, yeah. Nothing was due. I think in the grade book it showed week 7, but we're kind of it should have been discussion 7. But let me just double check, make sure we are good in that area. Bear with me. Okay, yeah. So looks like Packback is scheduled for week 8, so we're good there. So if you did one for week 7, no harm, no foul. Week 8 is going to be, we're going to be looking at doing grading for picking up grading once again for week 8. All right. All right. So again, I think I shared with you that on the back half of this semester, we're going to be looking at opportunities for what you can do to get more involved and get a little bit more knowledgeable on what's available with resources and information for child development, because again, many of you are probably going to be working in the field somehow. So for Thursday, what I would like to do is open the floor to anybody that would like to do a quick little presentation. So, and I'm going to put some information out there on D2L under assessments for week 8, and it's going to say extra credit. So for 10 points, what I'll be looking for is for any of you that want to go through the news and talk about public policies that address child development issues. And that could be education for prenatal development of mother's prenatal education or neonatal education for caregivers. Anything dealing with development up until this point, right? We've talked about cognition, teratogens, things that could affect, like environmental toxins that could affect child's birth. So any programs, any news, anything out there that you can find available, and just do a quick little summary, just maybe a couple minutes presentation on what you found and how it applies to child development, and why would this be interesting to us? Does that make sense? So again, I'll put a little bit more details on there, but I'm leaving it to your creativity. The only thing I'm looking for is just like a couple minutes presentation, and I'll give you the floor. So how many of you think you might be interested in doing something like that?
I am.
Okay. So I see a couple heads nodding. So maybe a couple of you. All right. So you don't have to let me know ahead of time. Just be here on Thursday, and I'll give you the floor for just a couple minutes to present what you found. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Very good. So let's pick up where we left off. Week 6, we got into cognition, and we talked a lot about what cognitive development looks like. What are the stages that we go through? And more importantly, how does intelligence fit in with that? Now, part of our discussion on last week, on week 6, not last week, the week that we met, was how does language play a role in learning and development? And I think we discovered that language is a pretty big role, isn't it? Because we think in symbols and emotions, but we also tie that to words, which is how we communicate. Now, part of cognitive development, when I consider thinking, we can generally assume that a person is thinking, right? We can assume that a child is thinking, especially a child. And we define thinking as being able to organize and manipulate information within our head. But the only way that we can really observe that is through some form of communication or behavior, either nonverbal communication, like the facial movements, any kind of expressions on their face, or body language, or even if they're complying with the behavior that we're giving them. So communication is imperative for us to be able to assess whether cognitive development or cognitive abilities are indeed intact. So let me share my screen with you so we can kind of talk about, and that's going to be our focus of today, is language and the development of language. Okay, so share my screen. I wish there was just like a one quick button I could press. I got to press like 5 buttons to get to sharing my iPad with you, but all right. So elements of language. Now there are a couple important terms that you'll need to know moving forward, and especially we're also going to do a quick little case study on Thursday. So be familiar with some of the things that we're talking about here. So excuse me. So language, really put simply, is a system. Oops, language. Can't cough and write at the same time. Language is really a system of related sounds or gestures that we put into meaning, that mean of something. Okay, and it obviously a form of communication, but it's a way to interrelate to others. What our thoughts and behaviors are. Okay, what our thoughts are specifically. And it's not an easy system. Okay, and if you think about it, how many of you know a second language? Anybody here? Nobody? I usually get at least a couple in each class.
I know French.
You know French? Okay. Where did you learn French, Kirsten?
I took 4 years in high school.
Okay, so did I, weirdly enough. That's some reason I was drawn to French. So parlez-vous français? Oui. That's about all I think I remember. So did you have any exposure to French prior to high school?
I tried learning when I was younger, like in middle school. It just caught my interest, so I tried learning by myself.
Okay, and then you took it in high school.
Yeah.
Now, how would you describe that experience? Was it really easy at first, or was it kind of a challenge?
Well, it was kind of difficult because I was going from like regular English to a different language when I was really young. I tried watching like videos. I had a English to French dictionary.
Yeah.
But when I went into high school, some of that like information that I retained when I was younger kind of clicked when I was taking the classes.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about that in this section as well. But so I'm just curious, what was your draw to the French language?
I don't know. I think it sounded really like cute. Like I thought it sounded really nice, and I like the way that people talked with it. So I thought that if I learned the language, I would be able to speak it fluently like them.
Okay, all right. So it was just kind of a. It's not that you knew anybody that was French. You just kind of thought it would be cool.
Yeah, I like the
Okay.
language.
Awesome. Well, good for you for doing that. How about anybody else? Anybody else learned to speak another language, or maybe took classes, or grew up in a bilingual household?
I took a French class for 1 semester at East Stroudsburg because I'm half Haitian, and on my mom's side, everyone speaks Creole except for me and my brother. So I wanted to learn French to transition into learning Creole.
Okay, and how was that experience for you?
I liked the French class. It was pretty easy.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. It just kind of felt right. Maybe it was because Creole kind of is like a branch off of like French.
It
So
is.
there's some like dialects that are the same. Like my mom explained it to me, like there's some dialects that are the same in like different parts of French speaking places. You can tell like, oh, you're speaking like your French sounds different. Oh, it's because I'm speaking Creole or something like that, is what my mom explained to me. But
Okay.
yeah, me and my
Yeah.
brother kind of grew up around that.
Okay, okay, really cool. And that's actually going to kind of set the stage for what I'm about to talk about next is phonology. Okay, phonology um, is put simply the sound of language. Okay, now Kwamir, what you were experiencing, sound of language, is so at a very young age. Again, if you kind of language. Can't write and talk at the same time. When we're at a very young age, if you recall, we have about 200 billion neurons within our brain, and we go through this process of pruning all through our mostly through our childhood and then into our adult lives. But through this pruning process, whatever is not formed, those neurons die off and they're really flushed out of our system. So what occurs during the first couple months of a child's of an infant's life is they're starting to pick up on sounds, familiar sounds, how people are the embouchure of the opening of their mouth, and how forceful the words and vowels and hard and soft sounds are, and whatever they don't hear is novel to them, it's new to them, and if they don't hear it, it goes away. So they're no longer paying attention to it. So two things are happening during the first few months of infant's life is they're picking up on repetition, things that are sounding familiar, and kind of building a sense of security for them. And then they're focusing on things that aren't familiar to kind of see, what am I missing? Okay, so if you can kind of think in terms of that. Now, Kwamir, the example that you brought is you were probably raised around a lot of French sounding words and syllables and like the opening of the mouth, because it's very different, isn't it? Yeah. So that helped you in that aspect. That probably helped you and set the stage for you to hear that. You described as taking it in college, and it was a little bit more easier, and that's because you were more familiar to the sound. So we have a lot that we have to get over. Now, Kirsten talked about it being very difficult during the beginning classes of French class of her 4-year journey in French classes. And I remember the same thing. Because I took 4 years of French class, and I think it was the first 2 semesters I had it. It was very difficult for me because I wasn't exposed to those sounds. And I didn't have the passion like Kirsten did earlier on. So it might have been a little bit easier for you than it was for me. But being familiar with those sounds, we pay attention to those things and we have a hard time trying to adjust, therefore hindering our ability to learn the words and correlate those a little bit easier, right? So anyway, phonology is the sound of language, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that when I get into phonemes, okay? So semantics. So when we look at semantics, we're really looking at the word meaning. So for example, if I say tree, how many of you can give me the definition of a tree, just off the top of your head?
It's a living organism that you can find outside. It made of bark and leaves,
Right.
like plants.
Okay, so if you gave that definition to somebody that was English speaking, we would be able to come up with the word tree, right? Pretty easily. So that's essentially what semantics are, is just assigning all these little bits of sounds, correlating them to letters, and the letters form words, and the words have meaning, okay? We also have syntax. So within each language system, we have rules that specify, let's see, rules that govern sentence structure, I guess, sentences. So for example, I like to use this one. My wife has this one on her notebook. It says, trying to think, oh yeah. Maybe some of you have seen this before. Has anybody seen that?
Yeah.
I've seen the grammar one.
Right. So syntax, these are the rules that really govern, and really we're talking about noun and verb relationship. But if somebody foreign that was not able to understand the syntax of this, it looks like cannibalism might be happening here, right? One might be looking to eat Timmy for a meal, but all it takes is a really a little comma there to insert a grammar rule that tells us, let's eat Timmy. Hey, Timmy, let's eat, right? So anyway, I like to use that one as example. Every time I see that, I kind of laugh about it. And that also applies to pragmatics of it. So essentially, these are the words that you should be familiar with the elements of language. Now, perceiving speech. Going to be looking at a couple things here. Now, we talked about phonemes, phonemes, sorry. Phonemes are biology. Sorry about that. Getting my two subjects mixed up here. But we look at phonemes as the building blocks for language. And we see these very early on with infants. Now, phonemes are what they're just really unique sounds joined to create words. So in the English language, we have e, a, o, f, d, anything like that sounds. Now, if you were to go into like a more of a Slavic country, they're going to sound a lot different. They might be e, u, a lot different than what we hear than what we would hear in America at that age. So children pick up on these, and at a young age, their minds are just absorbing so much. They're absorbing everything, and again, they start trying to put into tight little packages what they can familiarize, what's routine for them, and then they pay attention to something that's not routine, and then they try and incorporate that into their routine, their daily routine, what they're hearing, their routine senses, and anything that they don't hear gets it becomes foreign. It kind of just drops off. They don't build the neural pathways for those. So phonemes are put simply just the short little sounds, one syllable sounds of the language. Now these phonemes go into actual words, and we start putting them together, like apple or doggy or something like that. Now we have a bunch of these phonemes going into an actual word, and as children become a little bit more cultured to those words, they start assigning syntax. They start assigning semantics to that, which is the meaning for it, right? So what about impact the exposure of children to language? What do you think the impact? Do you think that children could learn languages on their own if they had no influence by their native speaker?
Yeah.
You think they could?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think children. I think more like later on in life, not like toddlers.
Mhm.
Like I feel like if you're like a toddler, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, I can learn Spanish. But like I feel like if it's like around the time you're like, I want to say like at the lowest 8 and on, because I remember taking a Spanish class in like elementary school.
Mhm.
So I think around that time, but like I think anything a little below 8, it would be a lot easier if you were always around that language, and if like people actively like not just talked around, like talk to like adults, like the adults just didn't talk to each other with it, but also like work to include you in the conversation. So like sometimes they'll talk to you in English, and then sometimes they'll help you like practice things in like in my case, I guess if I wanted to like learn Creole, I would ask my mom talk to me in Creole sometimes, and help me to do the response in Creole and understand like what I'm saying and how I'm pronouncing things, if I'm doing it right and stuff like
Okay.
that.
Okay. So getting that feedback is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that too, as far as especially with infant IDS, infant directed speech. That's very important as far as correcting kind of, and not harshly, but getting that feedback to infants so that they're able to build those syntax and build those semantics a little bit better. So this reminds me, us talk about this reminds me of a movie. Thank you, Quamir, for reminded me of this. So has anybody seen the movie Mockingbird Don't Sing? It's actually on my movie list. In fact, I have it here. I was trying to figure out a way to get everybody together and watch it, and maybe we will, possibly Thursday if I can. But it's a great movie, and it took place in right around, I think, the 70s, but 70s or 80s. But a young now young woman, girl named Jeannie is her name in the movie. I don't know if that's her actual name or not. Some of the details have been obscured just so to protect her privacy, because her family wants her to be kind of not be in the limelight for this. But anyway, she suffered a great deal of neglect and abuse at the hands of her father, who basically thought there was something wrong with her from birth and kept her caged in her crib, and later to a rocking chair that he cut out as a toilet in the middle of this blinded room. So she had little exposure to light. She had very minimal exposure to any kind of nurturing or care or interaction with any toys. She was just for almost 9 years, she was kept in the dark, in this dark place. And then after about 9 years, dad started letting her out around the house a little bit more, until about age 14, when it was she was discovered by the system as having been neglected. But what they determined was a critical period for language at this age. And being that she, for almost 9 years, did not have really any interaction or exposure to language, she was almost incapable of learning a spoken language. Now, it doesn't mean that she's not smart. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have ways to communicate. In fact, they found that she was able to kind of show affect a little bit better than most people, and she was a little bit more manipulative with her looks and her appearance, and just how she smiled at you. But anyway, they did determine that, and this kind of brought up the subject of feral children who are raised in the wild around any kind of nurturing might inhibit them from ever learning a spoken language. And as far as we know today, she probably has not mastered English language. She may know bits and pieces of it, but speech, that element of speech that she should have learned at infant stage, is probably gone. And kind of a use or lose, right? So anyway, great movie if you ever get the chance. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure out a way to do this over Zoom. But just out of curiosity, how many of you would be interested in seeing something like that if I could schedule that?
I would.
Okay.
I think I would. You had brought up the
I
movie
would.
you started talking about, and I thought it was like that thing on Hulu with the girl. I forgot the name of it though. She's like in a wheelchair, and her mom convinces her like, "Oh, you need to take all these medicines and everything because you're sick."
What is that
The
called?
act. Thank you.
The act.
Gypsy something.
Yeah, the act.
Gypsy Rose.
Yeah, Gypsy Rose. That's actually
Gypsy Rose or Gypsy Rose?
Named Gypsy Rose.
Gypsy,
It
yeah.
called The Act. It's a great
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna write that
Yeah.
down. And so it sounds like Munchausen by proxy. Is that what the theme to that is? What's her story?
Yeah, her mom convinced her that she was sick for years, and it was the Munchausen by proxy.
Okay. And this is a movie or a show?
No, it's like based
so-
off of like a real story. So I feel like you've definitely heard of it.
Yeah, the girl's name is Gypsy Rose.
The girl
Okay.
ends up killing her mom, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, her and her boyfriend.
They made a whole series
Spoiler alert.
Hulu.
My
Huh.
bad. I mean, my bad. Spoiler.
Oh, that's okay. What?
Yeah, it's like based off like everyone's doing. It's based off like the real story of Gypsy Rose. And,
Okay. Okay. No, I'll check that out and see if that's something I can. I'm always looking for movies. I think movies, more so than books anymore, really speak to us and illustrate things. Because we like information a little bit more quickly. At least I do. I'm happy to read a book, but if I can get the gist off of a movie, that I'm happy with that too. So yeah, I'll look that up. But yeah, Munchausen by proxy. Yeah, that's also a form of neglect, mental illness, usually on the caregiver side. And I've encountered several cases in my practice of that, and it gets pretty severe, pretty scary for all family members, all parties involved, really, and it really underdevelops the child's sense of independence and security in their lives as well, much past their childhood. Not to say that they can't get over it, but it really does wreak havoc on their psyche. So yeah, I got that written down. I'll check that out. Thank you.
If you have Hulu, it's on there. It's called The Act on Hulu.
Okay, I just got Hulu this week to watch Fargo. So, all right, but on Hulu. Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah, let me think about a way that I can present this movie, because I think it would be great. Yeah, I'll warn you now, the acting is not so great. In fact, I thought it was kind of cheesy, but the story, I was drawn in by the story to it. I think I saw it on Lifetime many years ago. But anyway, I'm digressing. All right, but thank you for that suggestion. So anyway, the impact of language at a young age, within right after birth, is important. Exposure to language. Okay. So beyond that, to a point, children that don't have, or that have minimal interactions with parents, and that could be for many reasons. And when we get to attachment, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But like adoption situations, and a lot of adoption occurs right after birth. So the mother gives birth, and immediately the adoption agency is there, as to for multiple reasons. First of all, to get the process rolling for handing off the child to the other person, but they don't want an initial attachment between the biological mom and the child to happen. They want to look at it more from the adopted side. So the mother, the adopted mother is bonding, starting the imprinting of the mother-child bond. So there might be instances where they don't meet the parents right away, sometimes for months afterwards. Impact of exposure could be very detrimental at that point. So we look at, and this is not the first time you'll see this, but usually in the 6 to 12 month range, if we don't have nurturing, no nurture, or minimal nurture, or exposure to language, we're going to start seeing some developmental delays. We're going to see emotional problems. We're going to see attachment issues. And later in life, most likely we're going to see mental health disorders. Okay. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Anything beyond 12 years, we're looking at serious degradation of their abilities. So anything after 6 months, now we're in that danger zone. So if that makes sense. So right, the best option is to have the child imprinted and attached, and language starts to be present in their lives earlier on. Okay. We also can implicate deaf children, deafness. All right. Children that are born without hearing. Usually we can tell that they're not responding to clicks or snaps or even startling sounds. All right. So that usually we can pick up on that probably within the first couple months, right? Month or 2-3 months out. It's very important for us to be able to get them to that point to determine whether or not they can hear. Because if not, the parents need to change their strategy and start promoting more sign language, or even better, if they can, if medical assistance or whatever their insurance can provide, if they can get cochlear implants. But that needs to happen again within, you know, that 6 to 12 months period. Anything beyond that, if they can't do that beyond that, they could still learn the language, but we're still looking at a potential of cognitive developmental delays. Okay. So really, I've got a short video for you on infant-directed speech. Has anybody heard of infant-directed speech? No, I mean, you all read about it, right? What is infant-directed speech?
It's the way a mother talks to an infant with their voice going kind of up and down, using smaller words and making sure that they have their attention.
Right. And for the most part, people do that automatically, don't they? They do that almost instinctually. I know when I had my kids, I did the same thing. I talked almost babyese, and I think your book calls it motherese, right? But using like a higher inflection, stressing or elongating the syllables a little bit longer so that they understand them, or they're starting to pick up on the sounds a little bit more importantly. Because if they come out and we're talking to them like I'm talking to you now, using short syllables, long words, and no breaks or punctuation, they're going to have a harder time picking up. I'm not saying it's impossible, but they're going to have a harder time picking up on that. So I do want to share a quick video with you here that kind of demonstrates how the trajectory of infant-directed speech goes, if I can find it. Excuse me. All right. Oh, I love Rebel. Okay. It logged me out, and hold on one second here. I had it queued up and it no longer wants to work. Okay, well, I may have to abandon the video. All right. Oh, there we go. All right. Does Rebel log you out pretty quickly? Or is that just me?
It's only did that
Sometimes.
recently.
What's that?
It only started doing that recently.
Okay, it logs you out pretty quickly. Yeah, it was only like 10 minutes, I thought. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you here. Maybe some of you have seen this. It was from the textbook. Oops, let me stop sharing. Desktop 1. All right, can you all see the video?
Yeah.
All right.
Where's mommy? Can you find me?
Cooing, which consists of vowel-like sounds, typically emerges during the first 2 months of life. When adults talk to young infants, they use infant-directed speech, which includes short, simple sentences that are spoken in an exaggerated high pitch.
Pet the bunny. Touch him. He's soft.
Cute is that? Are you a tickly girl? Are you a tickly girl? That's a new noise, huh?
By approximately 6 months, infants begin to babble. Children's first words are spoken around 1 year.
Thank you. Door, good. Can you show me the baby's eyes? Can you show me the baby's nose? Can you show me the baby's mouth? Where's the baby's hands? Hands. Where's the baby's feet?
Between 18 and 24 months, children display a vocabulary explosion, a period of rapid word learning. At the same time, they begin combining words to form sentences.
Say with a different one? It's beautiful.
I did it. No, triangle.
No. Where do you want me to draw the triangle?
Triangle degree.
Oh, triangle and green?
Yes.
Okay.
I will this. I will your baby.
Oh, yeah, you like that idea? You heard what I was saying. You want to hold the baby?
No.
No. Who should hold the baby?
Mommy hold the baby.
How about if Ema holds the baby?
Ema hold the baby.
All right, so you kind of get a sense how infant-directed speech goes then, right? It's very systematic, and they showed the ideal situation of how that trajectory usually goes. Now, again, there are a lot of circumstances where that won't happen, like adoption agencies or maybe neglectful home, or a situation in which the parents maybe aren't afforded the opportunity to interact. You know, I'm not going to say that it's intentionally neglectful, but let's face it, you know, in today's society, a lot of homes require multiple working parents. So that might be an obstacle for that child if they're left home with a teenage caregiver or something like that. So there are many situations in which that doesn't really happen, but you kind of see how those progressions happen, right? That you have the cooing, which is the oohs and the ahs, about 2 months. And those really form after about 6 months into structured babbling, dada and baba, but speech-like sounds that generally, I mean, they may not have any meaning, but they're getting a little bit closer. And then right around 8 to 11 months, we're going to start seeing more patterns rising and falling in their pitch, almost like questions, right? And so if you think about it, when we ask a question like, "How are you doing today?" We're emphasizing you, and we're kind of putting an inflection on it, which indicates that we're asking a question. It's interrogative. And children in America, believe it or not, other countries, there are some other countries that do that same inflection, but that's very unique to us, where we do that inflection with questions. And children pick up on that as early as 8 to 11 months, okay? So they start linking, also around that time, 8 to 11 months, they start linking to those words like dad and baba. They're linking to actually what they want. And they do learn those nouns first. So nouns generally are learned first after the babbling. Okay. And what happens after that is what we call naming explosion. And that occurs, let me get a new slide here. Words naming explosion. And that occurs around 15, they say anywhere from about 14 to 22 months. But it's about 15 months average, I think is what your book reported. So what that means, that if at 14 months or 16 months, the child is not learning 2 to 3 words per week, then that's nothing to be really alarmed about. Now, when we start getting to that higher end of 22 months, and they're not able to put 2 to 3 words together per week, we may be considering some kind of delay of some sort. Now, it's not uncommon, and my daughter was an example of this, where she didn't talk much at all for almost to her 2-year mark. Now, she understood what we were saying. If we gave her directions, or we gave her instructions, or we even mentioned something that we were doing, she seemed to understand. So there was really no concern there. But what happened there, and I think we talked about somebody in this class, as a matter of fact, who had a talkative older sibling, right? So that happens. If you have a talkative older sibling in that household, or the parents, there's a lot of activity going on, that child may not desire to be part of that, or maybe they do. But oftentimes we do see that with an active older sibling, and that was kind of our case with my daughter. So yeah, about when she got to her 2-year mark, it's almost like a paragraph explosion for her. She just started talking about everything in complete sentences. I mean, it was really remarkable.
I have a
And
question.
yeah, go ahead.
How many months after the 2-year mark should there be like more concern?
I would say there should probably be some consideration after about 22 months. Why do you ask that?
Because my cousin, like my nephew, about a month or 2 ago hit 2 years, and is barely doing like words, let alone like sequences of words.
Okay, what's his placement amongst siblings? Is he younger, older? Does he have older siblings?
No, he's the only.
Okay. And are there any other, I mean, does he seem to be responding
Yeah.
so he follows instructions and seems to understand, just isn't very verbal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, I mean, have they taken him to a specialist or brought this up with the doctors?
I'm not sure. I don't think they have. I think they're just more of just trying to get him, like trying to encourage him more to say words.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, that would be a concern of mine. It doesn't necessarily mean something's definitely wrong, but there might be some underlying factors as to why a child doesn't want to speak at that point. Maybe they're just observant. It could be, there could be many reasons to that. I'm not saying that beyond 22 months, there is something wrong. I'm just saying that at 22 months, if they're not speaking if they're not picking up 2 to 3 words per week, there might be some issues that they need to look into. So yeah, but I would say if he's following directions, he's able to comprehend what they're saying, that's okay. My concern would be he's not interacting with his environment. He's not communicating what he wants or what he needs. So that he's kind of behind in that area. But and no hearing issues that you know of, or sight issues?
No, none of those kind of issues.
Huh, interesting. Huh, yeah. I'd be I'm curious as to what could be happening there. It happens. And sometimes it works out great, but like I said, 22 months, that's a milestone that we really don't want to go beyond. And we start looking for other explanations. But okay, well, thank you for bringing that up as a personal example.
Both of my sorry, I don't know if it's okay if I jump in.
Yeah.
I have two boys. One is 9 and one is 6, and they actually both have apraxia of speech. So I know that's something that's like, you know, they need speech therapy in order to develop their speech. So that's something, not saying that that's what her cousin's son has or anything, but I took him to the pediatrician, and at a certain age mark is when they sent me to have them checked, just to, you know, see where they were at with their speech and let me know like what services were available for speech therapy and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be one of the options for that. Another one could be some kind of underdevelopment in the Wernicke's area or Broca's area, areas that are responsible. Broca would be more for understanding the language, receiving the language and comprehending it, which could be intact, but like the Wernicke, the inability to maybe produce the sounds or something or replicate what they're hearing. So it could be really anything. But yeah, I mean, as long as they're aware and they're taking them to a specialist, that's the best thing that they can do, to do more tests. So yeah, thank you, Felicia, for sharing that with us as well. Let's see here, trying to think so I'm going to, I'm going to stop here for today because we're going to really get into, we'll pick up with fast mapping to words, because this really builds into the syntax and the structure for grammar, and kind of putting everything together to form the language that we know today. And that really lasts throughout almost the entire childhood. But as long as you understand that the most critical periods are probably in the first few years of a child's life, if they don't start grasping those language abilities and those nuances within those languages, they could be seriously impacted the rest of their lives cognitively. All right. All right. Any questions, or does anybody have anything else to add today?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Justice.
So for the assignment, does it have to be like a children's book, or can it be like a book from like middle school?
I would recommend, because we're talking about like IDS, infant directed speech, and we're looking at the formation of language. So like for me, if I were to pick one, I don't know if any of you remember Clifford or Tip. Probably dating myself. I know Clifford might still be around, but does anybody remember Tip? Is Tip even still around? Probably not. So anyway, so those.
But I remember Clifford.
What's that?
I remember Clifford.
Yeah, Clifford. Yeah. Clifford. I think Clifford. I saw Clifford on PBS some years ago, so I think Clifford's still around. But anyway, those are examples of children's books, or maybe even Sesame Street. Something that it doesn't even have to have good sentence structure. We're not looking for sentence structure. We're looking at things that we were talking about today, like introducing new words. See Tip run, see Tip jump. We're focusing on the nouns and verb placement. So they don't even have to be full sentences. So I would say probably lower level, like kindergarten, first grade, no more than first grade. So just kind of think of an example. If you don't have one, there are plenty of examples out there. Ask your family, niece and nephews what they're reading, and maybe send you a picture or a copy of what they're looking at. So that way you can kind of get an idea of how this memory, this name explosion occurs, where we're introducing new words and we're kind of putting that in syntax and forming that sentence structure that we know today. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Would I be naming you if you gave a mouse a cookie?
Without what?
Would I be able to use the book if you gave a mouse a cookie?
If it's appropriate for no more than first grade, I think that would be okay. Dale, I'm having a hard time hearing you. It sounds like you're in a windy area. Yeah, sorry, I'm not able to make out what you're saying. All right, I'll tell you what, go ahead, put yourself on mute and maybe type it into chat, and I'll come back around to it, okay? All right, Chicka chicka boom boom, a good one to use. I'm not familiar with it, but again, if it's appropriate for like 7 and below, I would say go for it. Okay. All right. Any other questions or anybody else wish to comment on today's lesson? Did what I say make sense? Did I kind of illustrate a little bit better? Because I know your book kind of just rushes right through a lot of this stuff. Okay. All right. So that's all I have for today. If nobody has anything else, I'm going to stick around. Oops, I guess I could have taken my screen off. I'm going to stick around for just a few minutes here. I know a couple of you wanted to speak with me, but I'm going to stop recording now. The rest of you, if you have something you want to present, bring it on Thursday, and I'll give you a time at the beginning to do so. All right. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Yep.